do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thank you for joining me for another video on Thelema.tube. Tonight I'm going to be reading something written by Charles Stanfield Jones, otherwise known as Frater Achad. My inspiration for reading this particular piece tonight is twofold. One, I think that since I'm doing with a group of people on my server a audiobook version of Lilith Vala, it is altogether fitting that we should hear a little bit from Frater Achad about his thoughts on Aleister Crowley. And although that's a good reason, secondarily, the practice he describes in this writing is one which is interesting and can be practiced, and more information on that can be found easily. And I will probably link a Liber in particular to look at for that. That being said, and I will not go into too much history on him, a biography video about Frater Achad would take quite some time. But Aleister Crowley did at one point acknowledge Frater Achad as his magical heir, his magical child, and as I said, wrote Lilith Vala for him. What I'm going to be reading is titled Thinking Backwards by Frater Achad. In my initiation, I was taught to think backwards, and I am more and more convinced of the value of this practice. By thinking backwards, the man who is nigh bankrupt sees his wealth slowly or quickly increasing instead of slipping from his grasp. There is nothing to fear when one thinks backwards, and oft times the further we go, the more pleasing is the outlook. Childhood is ahead of us instead of behind, and our last thought of this life, that of slipping back into the womb of our mother. Even further than that, we many go until we find ourselves as a tiny spermatozoon leaping joyfully back into the loins of our Father. Even then, should we remember the present, we have not learned much and rediscovered the basic principle in ourselves, for that seed is ever as alive within us now as it was him, ever multiplying and dividing, ready to leap forth again on its eternal mission. Things sometimes seem very ordinary when we look at them as they appear to us now, but one little trip backwards and we return refreshed. That which seemed so ordinary becomes wonderfully illuminated by the light of our newly awakened memory of the past. The Master Therion, it was who taught me to think backwards. And this is the way I have come to think of the Master Therion. This method fills me with joy, for it leads me towards my ideal. Listen, I was with him today. He was very ordinary, even a little petty, it seemed. There was nothing about him to arouse my enthusiasm. He was too near for me to appreciate. Before I went to see him, he was more interesting because I imagined he would be so much better than I found him to be. But a little while ago, I was with him on Oedipus Island, and there, as I remember, he seemed even better still. He told me such and taught me so much that I delighted greatly in his company. But before that, a little while before that, he was better still. I had just come to New York to visit him, and there seemed so much he could tell me and be to me, for he was not my magical father, and I had not given up all to be with him in his work and to learn from his example the way of life and the true path. Yet even before that, he seemed better still. For months I had longed to be with him, to listen to his words of wisdom, that mine understanding might be perfect, even as his son should be. Then I had but lived with him on other planes, and through others had been told me much that might have disheartened me, but I must hark back again. Before that, last December, in fact, he seemed very wonderful, even though perhaps I felt that I might find my path led to a place where I must meet him in terrible conflict. For was he not the great magician of the path of Bet? But before that, had I not thought of him as a pure wisdom, the word of the Aeon, so that his attainment was such a wonderful thing that affected every living thing? Did I not feel that every thought of his was a word of power, and that every act was a sacrament of utmost purity? And before that, had I not plunged into the abyss to become Nemo, sitting in the darkness and sorrow, that he might attain the grade of Magus? Had I not before that given him up, so that he might be free, because I thought so much of all that he had done for humanity and for me? What a wonderful conception I had of him then. And before that, was he not my master and my dearest treasure? For from him I received the secrets of high magic. Did not his image surpass the stars in my sight? But before that, had he not come to me in the city of Vancouver in his body of flesh and appeared so fine a person of a man, all who met him were delighted in his presence, even in the presence of his body, for that encased a soul of such wonderful power and brilliance that all was light in his presence. And before that, had not he been to me as Frater O.M., a mysterious being, one with the great white brotherhood, whose nature was but dimly shadowed in my mind as my highest aspiration, so that the whole power of the deity seemed enshrined in him. Wonder beyond wonder that one might even be the light of this world himself, disguised under the name O.M. And before that, Perdoabo, he that shall endure to the end, nameless, almost unknown to me perhaps, but living for the good of everything, even me. And before that, I knew him not. He was one with my ideal and myself, and now he is my ideal. Insofar as I know him, today it may be he approaches the infinitely small. Yesterday he appeared infinitely great. And tomorrow? This portion was written, the last I'm going to read was written after Crowley passed away. Achad writes in 1948, "After thinking it over for another 30 years, I still feel that perhaps this is the best way to view the Master Therion." You can look in the link, and I will post a URL for the Liber regarding thinking backwards. In addition, I think that this is a very interesting way to understand a little bit about what Frater Achad thought of Aleister Crowley. And so, for both of those reasons, I think it's an interesting reading. And if anyone is interested in joining the Liber Aleph audiobook project, different people will read each section as is being done, and the eventual goal beyond publishing these on YouTube is to make a free, for everyone, audiobook version of Liber Aleph with many different voices. And as always, check out both the YouTube channel and as well my Discord, which you can find in the links below. And I look forward to many more videos and many more interactions. And I wanted to say a great thank you to all of those who have been participating in this reading recording process for the Liber Aleph audiobook. I think that making more Thelemic audiobooks free is going to increase the likelihood that some people will engage with the material initially. And with that, thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Love is the law. Love under will. Until next time, goodbye.